It's October 9th, 2023, beautiful city of Sydney, Australia. My name is Jong-woo Han. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has more than 1,600 Korean War veterans interview in depth, on average more than 30 minutes from all 22 countries. I was here in Melbourne and Brisbane in 2019. I did some interviews of Australian Korean War veterans interview, not many. So that's why we are doing this, okay? To preserve your memory, first of all, because it's been more than 70 years. But most importantly, we want to provide more curricular resources, real curricular resources about the Korean War when teachers talking about the Korean War in their classroom. So this interview will be used by Australian teachers and many other teachers from all of the countries to talk about the Korean War from the direct witness of the Korean War veterans. And today it's going to be you, M Crawford. So it's my great pleasure and honor to meet you, sir. And thank you for inviting me to your beautiful house.
Thank you, Jong-woo. I am delighted to be doing this. It is so important that we record the story of the Korean War because it is unique in Australian history. There are so many aspects that we need to record today.
Excellent. So please introduce yourself. What is your name, sir?
My name is Ian McLean Crawford.
Could you spell it?
Yes, I-A-N, which is Scottish for John. McLean, capital M-C, capital L-E-A-N. Crawford, C-R-A-W-F-O-R-D.
What is your birthday, sir?
My birthday is the 30th of December, 1931.
So you were born in the 30s?
In the 30s, yes. Just got into the 30s.
Last day of the year?
Yes.
Wow. And you're born in 31, so you are now
91, rising 92.
92?
The end of the year.
By this end of the year, right?
Yes.
So you are currently 91?
Yes.
Yeah. You look great, sir.
Thank you.
What is the secret?
Being looked after by my wife.
Oh, yeah, by the way, I was received by your wife, Catherine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope that I can bring her here at the end of our interview.
She has been a great help to me in the work I've done on the Korean War, encouraging me, pointing out things that could be done better. So I'm very grateful to her, and I'm very grateful that she's going to be involved in the recognition.
Excellent. And you told me that she was working for education department here in Australia?
In Canberra, she worked.
In Canberra?
Yes.
Yeah, in the capital city.
In the capital city.
Great.
We had a separate government system for the Australian Capital Territory.
Exactly.
And they had their own education organisation, and she worked for that.
ACT, right?
ACT.
So where were you born in Australia?
I was born in Sydney, here in Sydney.
And tell me about your family background when you were growing up. Your parents, your father, your mom, and your siblings.
Right. My father was born in Scotland, but he was a radio officer in the Merchant Navy, in the P&O. And he came to Australia and met my mother, who had come to Australia with her family in 1912.
From where?
From England.
From England.
And the whole family came here looking for opportunities. It's quite a story. My grandfather and his eldest son came ahead of the rest of the family to find work. Couldn't find it in Western Australia, so they caught a train to Adelaide and left a message for the family that was coming on in a later ship. Don't get off the ship in Western Australia, keep on coming round to Adelaide. I've found work here. So they stayed in Adelaide. My uncle, the one that accompanied my grandfather, went off to the First World War and was at Gallipoli and was wounded in France. And the youngest son was in the Second World War, as was my father. But because we lived in Sydney and we lived in Mossman, which is by the harbour, and because my father had been in the Merchant Navy, we were very familiar with the ship traffic, and we knew all the ships, all the liners that came to Sydney. Every day there would have been a ship coming into Sydney because air hadn't become so important. So I was, and of course being in Mossman, there was access to sailing. We did a lot of sailing. So I loved the maritime environment.
I see. That's why you are end up in Navy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about siblings?
I had a brother, and he went into the army. After hearing of my experience,
Older brother.
my younger brother,
Younger brother.
yes, went into the army.
So there were two sons only.
Two sons and one daughter.
Ah, you are the eldest?
I'm the oldest. My brother went into the army, and he fought in Vietnam. He was awarded a medal for bravery and for leadership, and he did very well in the army.
Very good. Tell me about your educational background. What school you went through, and when did you graduate high school? What
Yes.
year?
I went to a school called North Sydney High, which has a record now of being have the best record for a boys' high school in the whole of Australia.
Ah.
And when I was in the Navy, when I was an admiral, 25% of the admirals of the Australian Navy came from that school.
Wow.
But most people went from that school at the age of 13 to join the Navy, to join the Naval College. I tried, but my eyesight was not good enough, so I had to wait until I was 17. But it has a great record of students going to the Navy and also into the Royal Military College at Duntroon. It prided itself, Duntroon.
Yeah.
It prided itself in providing officers in Navy, Army, and Air Force.
Yes. I actually drove through Duntroon too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
It is.
And there is a golf course too.
There is. And in winter, they have parades there. They have the Queen's Birthday Parade. It's a very ceremonial college.
I see.
And I had a nephew who went to Duntroon as well.
So when did you graduate North Sydney High School?
I finished at the school in 1948 and joined the Navy in 1949. And because we had already been educated to matriculation level, we went to Naval College and we had a very concentrated naval focus on gunnery, navigation, seamanship.
So it was like a university, Naval College.
Yeah, we do have...
Can you explain about Naval College? What
Yes,
is it?
Naval College was set up, patterned on what the Royal Navy did, what the British Navy did, when young men went in at the age of 13. We weren't getting all the people we needed through that 13-year-old entry, and therefore we introduced a special entry, the 17-year-old entry. And I was entered under that scheme, and we used to have a concentrated focus on naval subjects because we had already matriculated, and we joined the senior year and learnt our naval subjects, and then left to go to the United Kingdom. Our Navy was not big enough in those days to give us the range of experience that was needed. So we left Australia.
Hold on. How many years in the Naval College? 4 years?
No, 6 months.
Just 6 months?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
And I'll come to how we compensated for not going to university later on. But we joined the senior year, and those who joined at the age of 13 did 4 years, and they had to progress to the matriculation level.
Oh, I see. So because you joined at 17,
We
so
had
that-
already achieved that level
exactly.
in education
So that you don't have to do but just 6 months, and you went to
of concentrated naval subjects.
and then UK.
Then the UK.
Where did you go in UK?
Well, because we were young officers, we travelled first class, P&O, to the United Kingdom, and then we joined.
What do you mean first class in the airplane?
No, in a liner.
Oh, okay.
And then we joined as 17-year-old cadets.
Yeah.
We joined the British training cruiser, which was a heavy cruiser, HMS Devonshire, which had been converted from its warfare role into a training ship, where we did 2 cruises, one to the Mediterranean and one to the West Indies. And in that we slung hammocks, we scrubbed decks, we ran boats, we kept watches, we did all the things that a sailor does, but we went to school in the afternoon to further our naval education. And that was we did that in 1949 and early 1950. First cruise was to the Mediterranean, and that was very interesting. It was just after the war, and we went to places which were just recovering from the war, like the south of France, Malta, where the British fleet. It was. And we furthered our training, did a lot of sailing there. And then the next cruise was to the West Indies. And when we were on those cruises, we went to a number of ports, but we also had sailing picnics. And we'd get into a naval whaler or cutter, sail away to a remote beach, and stay there for the whole weekend with our instructors, just relaxing. And in the Mediterranean, we went to the Isle of Capri, and in the West Indies, we went to Grenada, to a remote beach there. So we had a very interesting training, but we learnt a lot. And then we were promoted to the rank of midshipman. And a lot of people say that a midshipman is the lowest form of marine life. And I was appointed to a light cruiser, HMS Ceylon. Ceylon is now called Sri Lanka. And we were to be the flagship of the British East Indies station based in Trincomalee. And our area of interest was the east coast of Africa, the Persian Gulf, and India. And we were settling down and on our way out there, we picked up Somali seamen and stokers who were straight out of the bush, and we had to kit them up and teach them the basics of looking after a ship.
So they are still doing that. They are the piracy there.
Interesting that you say that, because the station orders were to suppress piracy.
Right.
And slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery was still going on.
Yeah.
So, but we didn't stay there long. We were just about to go to India, and our doctor had signed 600 certificates for 600 alcoholics, because that was the only way you could get a drink in India in those days. And instead of going there, the Korean War broke out. And the British had sent one of their cruisers back to England, and they didn't know the way the war was going to develop, and they didn't want to leave the Far East station, which had previously been called the China station, short of one cruiser. So we were quickly transferred to the Far East Fleet. And we went to Singapore, we prepared the ship, maintenance, did training in damage control, putting out fires, and then we gave the impression that we were heading back to the East Indies Fleet, back to Sri Lanka. But overnight we turned around and went off to top secret, went to Hong Kong. And as we came into Hong Kong, top secret, there was Jenny's side party, people who used to keep the side of the ship clean, with a welcome HMS Ceylon. So we stayed there for a few days, and we were joined there by an Australian destroyer, HMAS Warramunga. Emergency Australian ship, Warramunga, Warramunga. Waramanga, Warramunga. It's a tribal class destroyer. We had
So Warramunga.
correct, yes.
So what kind of ship was it?
It was a destroyer.
Destroyer.
Based on the British tribal class. They had tribal class called the Maori, Eskimo, forget some of the others, but we had 3 of them in Australia. Warramunga was an Aboriginal tribe, and Arunta.
So explain what destroyer means. How big was it? How many crew members there? What kind of weapons they do?
Okay.
And what do they do actually?
They multi-role, mainly gunnery and anti-submarine. They were escorts, but they could operate shore gunfire. So we had committed ourselves. I'm talking now as an Australian, even though I was an Australian in a British ship. We had committed ourselves to have 2 ships in Japan following the Second World War.
No. HMAS, that's the Australian ship.
Yes.
So you were in the
I was in HMS Ceylon.
Ceylon. Ceylon, what? SA?
Ceylon is Ceylon. Ceylon.
Oh, Ceylon, okay, yeah.
And the British had a class of cruiser, light cruiser, and they were colony class cruisers.
Yep.
So there was Fiji, Jamaica, Kenya, Ceylon.
So you were in the HMS Ceylon 2, now in the HMAS Warramunga.
I wasn't in Warramunga. Warramunga was with us, part of our force.
But you were still in the British ship?
Oh yes, I stayed with the British ships for 3.5 years. I didn't.
So how many Australian Navy crew there?
In the British ship?
Yeah.
1, me.
You're the only one?
I was the only one.
So then you served Korean War in British ship as an Australian
yes.
midshipman?
Yes.
Huh, that's very interesting.
Yes.
Why didn't you transfer to Warramunga?
Warramunga, because I was in a pattern of training. We had a sequence of courses to do. We had our training cruiser time where we learnt seamanship and did certain skills. Then we had to upgrade as midshipmen in a cruiser, or some people went to an aircraft carrier, some people went to battleships. But we were all doing our sea time under training as 17 and 18-year-old midshipmen. Mm-hmm. When we finished that, we went back to the United Kingdom, and after the Korean War, after some time in Singapore, I went back to the UK. We did more courses, and this is where I come to how we compensated for not going to university.
Right.
We did not go to university, but we wanted to have the educational background. So we went to the Royal Naval College at Greenwich in London, and we had a general education course, and they taught us philosophy. We had to write papers. We had interviews with a tutor. We had tutorials. It was a marvelous experience of compensating for not having been to university.
But by the time that you were in Hong Kong,
yes,
you were qualified to be the regular Navy crew, right?
I was regular Navy right from the start, yes.
Exactly. So why didn't you go to Australian ship, Warramunga?
Because Warramunga wasn't part of the program. We were participating in the Royal Navy's program because we wanted the range of experience. We didn't have light cruisers. We didn't have enough ships to give us the range of experience that the British could give.
Okay. So they wanted to keep you there in the British ship.
The British ship, and to go back to England after being ashore in Singapore at a naval air station, once again more of our experience, I went back in a troop ship.
So, when did you participate in the Korean War? When?
In HMS Ceylon from 1950 until 1951.
Wow, that's very interesting, right?
Yeah, so we were in Hong Kong, and we were taking off for Korea, and we were called back.
Oh.
Because the Americans had said to the British government, we're in trouble in Korea. We've been pushed into the Busan perimeter. Can we have some soldiers?
Right.
And the British said, yes, maybe next year we'll be able to let you have a brigade from the British Army of the Rhine. The Americans said, too late, we may not still be there.
Right.
So the British put together a brigade from the garrison in Hong Kong. And there was the 1st Battalion of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders and the 1st Battalion of the Middlesex Regiment. The 1st Battalion of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders was put on board our ship, Ceylon. The 1st Battalion of the Middlesex Regiment was put on board HMS Unicorn, which was an aircraft repair ship, and escorted by HMAS Warramunga, we took off for Korea. And then as we came into the Taiwan Straits, we were joined by another Australian destroyer, HMAS Bataan. But
when was it? When you passing around the Taiwan Straits?
August 1950. But then we had all the young officers of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in the gunroom where the midshipmen were. And one of them came up to me and said, "You're Australian?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm Australian too, but I've never been to Australia." And his story, his name was Mike Crawford. It's an important story that he gets recognition. His father had been in the First World War, had been wounded, came back to Australia and wanted to continue soldiering. Australia did not have a regular army. We had a regular navy and a regular air force. We did not have a regular army. So they said, if you want to be in the permanent forces, you have to go either to the British Army, or we suggest to you, you go to the British Army in India. So he went to the British Army in India, was promoted to Major General.
Major General?
Eventually. And on the way, he married a woman, and they had a child. And as was the practice in British colonial times, people were sent back to boarding school in England. So this fellow, Mike Cawthorne, born of Australian parents, never been to Australia, went to boarding school in England, finished his schooling, left school, went into the army, and off to Hong Kong to join the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. And he came and we struck up a friendship. Sadly, he was killed on the last day that the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders were in action. And so one of the challenges I've accepted is to get him recognised in Australia. And at the War Memorial, in our Roll of Honour, we only recognised people who were in Australian ships and units, battalions. He was not, but he gets some form of recognition, and we display his medals there. But I later met his father. His father was a very distinguished Australian and went into foreign affairs, diplomatic service, and I was very proud that I've met Mike Cawthorne. So that was the start of my time. We arrived in Busan with the Argylls, escorted by 2 Australian destroyers, and with HMS Unicorn with the Middlesex Regiment. We landed them. It wasn't an opposed landing. We just came to the wharf, and they went off to the front line. They were in action almost immediately, and we went about our naval duties. And the first really important action was the landing at Incheon. We were part of the escort force for the landing at Incheon. Then.
So tell me about what do you mean by escort? What kind of role did your ship play? And by the way, what was your specialty at the time in the ship in Ceylon?
In the job I had in the ship in action stations, I was the assistant gun direction officer for the anti-aircraft armament on the starboard side of the ship. So we were in a platform behind the bridge, and our job, lookouts or radar would find enemy aircraft approaching, and we would decide which of the armament we would direct. So
Actually, you didn't have much role to play because there was no enemy aircraft much.
but there was. Our sister ship, HMS Jamaica, was attacked by a North Korean aircraft.
Really?
And one of my term, a New Zealander, was wounded. So
When was it?
When was it?
Yeah.
In August. No, September. September. 1950.
So North Korean airplane attacked the ship.
Ships in Incheon Harbor.
Incheon Harbor.
Very foolhardy.
Yeah. Oh, this is very interesting. But before we get into your naval routine mission,
Yes.
I want to ask this question. You went through very good high school, North Sydney
Yes.
High School, which produced 25% of the admiral for the Australian Navy.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you learn anything about Korea at the time?
Nothing.
Nothing.
In fact, had no idea where Korea. When they said where the Korean War has broken out, we had no idea where it was.
What about other countries like China or Japan?
Certainly, Japan. Well, Japan had been a threat to Australia in the Second World War, and China is so huge. That,
Right. So you knew about them,
Yes,
but you never knew anything about Korea.
Nope.
Now you are the one who actually contributed to the establishment of the Korean War Memorial in
Yes.
in Anzac Street in Canberra.
And I think it is very important for a number of things.
Isn't that ironical? You
Yeah.
didn't know anything about Korea. Now you are all about Korea, right?
Yeah, and I'm very anxious that we understand Korea through understanding the Korean culture. And I impress upon Korean people and Australian museums and art galleries that they should have Korean works of art and maps. Maps is the best way of understanding
Man,
a country.
I love this person. Oh, I love it. I want to share my books that I published with you
yes.
later, okay?
Yes.
I didn't bring it because it's too, heavy, but I will send it from my home, okay?
Thank you.
It's all available in the Amazon, but I want to send it to you. So you didn't know anything about Korea, but now you are the Korean War veteran. How do you put that into a perspective?
It took me some time. I wondered when I left the ship in Singapore whether I would have whether my experience in the Korean War, other than my learning shipboard skills, would have any impact. And it took a while for me to appreciate that I had met Korean people. I had an understanding of East Asia. Up until that time, we always spoke about the Far East. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, in its own right, there is the East Asia. We had to understand that East Asia...
Yeah, it's nothing far east from Australian perspective. It's right over there, right?
Exactly.
It's a British perspective that is
a European,
East.
Yes, the Far East.
Yeah.
And they used to call their fleet the Far East Fleet.
Yeah.
And then I started taking an interest in East Asia, inspired by my knowledge of Korea, meeting Korean people, especially when I was doing the Korean War Memorial and got to meet Korean people. But then I realized that I had to, not just Korea, I had to understand the Chinese and the Japanese, especially the Chinese. The Chinese is such a complex country, there's so many minorities. And that is very important for children to understand.
Absolutely.
The number of minority people that are in China, which makes it very difficult for the administration of China. And they cannot generalize on any understanding of China. They have to understand all the minorities.
Exactly. And Admiral, the Korean War was not just between North and South Korea. It was the war between UN forces and China and Russia.
Russia didn't come into the war, but
they provided everything.
They provide, as well as providing material, they provided guidance, and that is very important because
Absolutely.
because most of the casualties in the Korean War were soldiers and airmen, but it was Stalin who warned the Korean president against getting involved in a war with the Western Allies because they had maritime supremacy.
Exactly.
And maritime supremacy would determine the outcome of the war. Mm-hmm. And in our official history, there is at the end a recognition of the importance of maritime supremacy. My soldier friends don't like my talking about this, but it is so important in so much that we do.
Absolutely.
And because we could interdict their lines of communication and
logistics.
Yes, and of course, when we were almost pushed out of Korea, we lost our airfields.
Yep.
Where did our aircraft come from? Aircraft carriers.
Absolutely.
So maritime supremacy is so important.
Yep, and that's one topic that I learned from the geopolitical, coursework in my PhD program.
And I'm sure Norman Lee would have told you about it.
You didn't know nothing about Korea. Have you been back to Korea since after?
Yes, I have.
When did you go back?
I went back when I proposed to the government that we should have a Korean War Memorial, and they accepted it.
When was it?
In about 1991. Was it 1991? Yeah, but I proposed that before then, and I thought I'd better go to Korea to see what it was I was going to represent in the Korean.
So you proposed the idea of establishing Korean War Memorial in Canberra.
Yes.
In 1991, right?
Yes. And I was challenged by the Department of Canberra, the Capital Authority, National Capital Authority, that I'd have to raise the funds, and I had to produce a design concept.
Yep.
And I thought, well, now if I'm going to make all these proposals, I better, because in the ship I only saw Busan and Daejeon-do. That was the only places I ever went ashore.
Daejeon-do, that's one of the 5 small islands in West Sea.
Yes.
Yeah, very close to Hwanghae province.
Yes.
Yep.
And you go around the corner to the Taedong River in Chinampo.
Yes. So Daecheong, do. Do means island.
Yes.
In Korean.
We call it Taechong-do.
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead, sir.
So that was all I'd seen. I'd never, and of course, after my time, we had battles like the Battle of Kapyong, the Battle of Narang-san. I'd never seen the locations of these. I'd never been to the the Korean War Memorial cemetery in Busan. So I suggested that I should go to Busan, or to Korea. I was going to England, and the government said, yes, we will pay for the Korean part of it, but going on to England is your expense. So I went to Korea, met people.
In 1991?
1991.
Whom did you meet? Korean government people?
Yes, but mainly the Korean War Veterans Association. And some people, and the Australian Embassy, and they provided me the support.
Yeah.
And I met with local people in the Kapyong province.
I see. But in 1991, were you retired already?
Yes, I had retired.
Okay.
So I enjoyed that, and I met one of your heroes, General Pak Son-yop.
Yeah.
Very impressed by him.
Absolutely.
I met him a few times. And he eventually, when we had our memorial, and we dedicated our memorial. He led a mission from Korea to help us dedicate
Yep.
at the ceremony. But I was most impressed by him.
Yep.
So I enjoyed my visit to Korea. I enjoyed meeting the people, and noted that they had similar interests that we had. So
let me ask this question. You didn't know anything about Korea. Now you are one of the most proud and, established Korean War veterans in Australia, and you contribute to the establishment of Korean War Memorial in Canberra. And you never been in the soil when you were in Korea, right?
right.
But when you saw Korea in 1991, what did you see? How did you feel about it? Tell me, please.
We had heard stories. We'd seen on TV the absolute devastation of Korea during the Korean War. Going back in 1991, and it progresses from there. The huge success, the economic success, the political success.
Democratization.
Yes. And the person I met a few times in these visits was Kim Dae-jung. And I'm most impressed by him.
Absolutely.
And in one of my visits to Korea, he had just come back from Pyongyang.
North Korea.
And we were a little mission of veterans from many countries, and he talked to us in the Blue House about having just come back. And I thought, here am I, the first Australian to hear about his experience in Pyongyang.
That must be 2000.
2000, after we had dedicated the Korean War Memorial. So it wasn't just interest in Korea. Became interested in the whole of East Asia. And I have books up there on East Asia. And I try to understand East Asia, the difference between the various societies. And it's easy because China is so complex. You can't.
But when you see Korea in 1991 and 2000, how Korea looked to you?
Brilliant.
Tell me, because Admiral, as I told you, this interview will be heard by young children all over the world. They don't have any idea about Korea in 1950 and after that. Please explain in detail.
I was interested in their schooling and how committed the young people were to their education. Sometimes too committed. It can be dangerous and they can do harm to themselves. But
that's true, actually.
Yes. So I enjoyed traveling from Seoul to Busan in the very fast train, seeing the countryside, seeing the rural areas, and just realizing how important access to farming country it was, and of course how important the sea is, but the modernization of your cities while retaining the essential Korean culture. And I think it was so important in anything we do. Yes, modernization, and I realized that you weren't being westernized, you were being modernized. And it is important to make that distinction.
That is very scholastic distinction.
Yes.
You made an excellent point. Westernization and modernization sometimes goes together, but it's different.
And retaining your culture
Absolutely.
is so important.
Oh, I love this interview. So, had you ever imagined that Korea would become like this today?
No.
Did you underestimate Korean people?
Yes, we did, because some of our...
that's a very honest answer, actually.
Yes, because our contacts with the Korean Navy, Republic of Korean Navy, was not always... You didn't have the big ship experience, and therefore some of our operations were not as successful as they could have been. We did not appreciate their contribution to our operation.
You mean during the war?
During the war.
Yeah, there was not much Navy in Korea.
No.
And?
So we looked down on the Republic of Korean Navy. Now, with my visits to Korea, meeting Korean people, meeting the Korean military,
Yes.
I have a respect for. This is part of the modernization, not the westernization, the modernization.
That's very important point here, audience. The difference between modernization and westernization, that is very important point. So we'll talk about that later. But so now Koreans are selling their weapons to Australia. Did
That's
you know
right.
that,
That's right. Yes.
Can you believe that?
Delighted. Delighted. I still think there's a lot to be done for greater understanding of your culture. Because the Japanese took so much from your country for their museums, there is not a lot for them to release to Australia to put into our museums. So, yes, we can have some of your items, not many, but the important thing is to have maps to show where they came from and tell the story. Now, there's a great department store in Seoul which also has a museum. I've forgotten its name now, but they tell the story of Korea, going back to early times and the Korean War.
I will send you my book that is about the Korean capital city of Hanyang during the Joseon Dynasty.
Oh, yes.
And then Gyeongsang during the Japanese colonial control, and then Seoul, but it's the same exactly location where that went through all different eras of state and society relations. And if you read that book, you will have a pretty good idea of how Korea was able to accomplish simultaneous economic development and democratization. So I will send it to you.
Yes. The other thing I admired, and I learnt, was the script, which is a better phonetic representation of sound than any other script in the world.
You mean the alphabet?
Yes.
Korean language?
Yes.
Yes.
Hangul.
Hangul, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That impressed me.
That's a very scientific.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of the emperor.
Sejong.
Sejong Do.
Sejong, yeah.
Sejong, yeah.
Sejong.
Sejong, yes.
Yep.
Yes, and of course he would have had his experts, but he encouraged
Yes.
that. And it is now recognized as the best representation of sound of all alphabets in the world.
Yes. So exactly, one tribal groups in Indonesia, in very distant island,
Yes.
they adopted Korean characters,
I didn't know that.
and they speak their language with Korean alphabet, Korean consonant and Korean vowel.
How interesting. Do they use the form of the script?
Yeah.
How
Yes.
interesting.
How interesting.
Yes.
But how interesting that you pointed out. I am very, very
Well,
thankful about this opportunity.
but there's so much for us to learn from mutual understanding
Yes.
of our cultures.
So when we host a conference, this is what my foundation is doing. We produce the curriculum book for US, UK, and Canada. I show the Canadian books and US and UK books to your wife, Catherine,
Yes.
while you were preparing.
Yes.
And we are going to produce Australian book on its participation in the Korean War.
Good.
And when we do publish for the history teachers, so my foundation's motto is of the teacher, for the teacher, by the teacher. Otherwise, nobody going to talk about Korean War in 10 years.
Yeah, very true. And that
So,
worries me.
When we publish the curriculum book, we're going to host World Congress of History Teacher. So many Australian teachers will be invited, and then history teachers from other countries also will be invited
How exciting.
to either Sydney or Canberra, wherever, where that we can find a good rate for the hotel. and then we're going to talk about it. And when we do that, I think you have to come and talk about Korea.
Well, I'm not a historian. I'm not a.
But you point the very important thing: Westernization, modernization, and the map.
Yes.
You know, it's no other Korean War veteran actually told me about it. So, okay. So you are proud about what Korea has accomplished, right?
Oh, yes, and proud that we were involved in it. And you had to go through certain stages of democratization, but you have done it. And I enjoy the visits and the links between Australia and Korea. For example, we have an Australian War Memorial. Mm-hmm. When you were developing in Seoul the Korean War Memorial, mm-hmm. you were very much influenced by what we did, and you had liaison people in Canberra. And when I was most recently in Korea, the director of the Korean War Memorial, yep. which is a museum, yep. singled me out, found me, and thanked me for what Australia did to help them develop the Korean.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and so they had a person on liaison staff with the Australian War Memorial to learn the way we did it. And it's an interesting thing, as well as being a memorial, it's a museum.
Yes.
And that's what you have done in Seoul.
I work with the War Memorial. I gave the drawings that was done by the Korean War veterans, and I donate them to that. So I closely work with them, but I was very impressed about the museums in Canberra.
Yes.
I was very impressed with the War Memorial, but I also went to the Museum of Australian Democracy in Old Parliament Building.
Oh, yes, yes.
And
yes.
National Capital Exhibition. You did superb jobs.
Yes.
Oh, so the Korean War Memorial learned from your memorial.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
And I was on the council of the Australian War Memorial for 7 years. And I think I was the only Korean War veteran to be on the council of the War Memorial. So I was very touched when I went to Korea last time. The Lieutenant General, who was the director of the Korean War Memorial in Seoul, wanted to tell me how much they appreciated the experience of their member who works with the Australian War Memorial and our contribution to your development.
But the problem is, you said all these good things about Korean War and what good actually came out of the Korean War and your service.
Yes.
Korea is now 10th largest economy in the world. 10th largest economy in the world. Their economy is stronger than Australia.
Yes.
And they are also accomplished democracy at the same time. So it's a good story to tell, but not much. It's been known as Forgotten War. And in Australian standard and curriculum, they don't talk much about the Korean War. Why is that?
That's interesting, because we faced that problem. We didn't have a regular army. So when we went to war, in the First World War and the Second World War, we had to have volunteers. We had a militia who were training for war, but we did not have a regular army. So when the First World War came and the Second World War, we had to recruit volunteers. And there was hardly a family that was not touched by having volunteers in the First World War and the Second World War.
Yeah.
So when it came to the Korean War, we still did not have a regular army. People had to be volunteers to go, and so we did not have a big force. Most of the people in
You didn't have a regular army?
We didn't have a regular army.
Are you sure?
Oh, yes. Eventually we did. But at that time, when we first went to war, and people had to be volunteers.
I know.
Yeah.
They volunteered. They were not drafted, but still, you didn't have a regular army.
We didn't have a regular army.
Okay.
So When they came back from the Korean War, these volunteers, they hadn't been to the Second World War. They said, "We've been to war," and all the fellows back here said, "You call that a war?
There was conflict."
Yes. So, and as President Truman said to get his force committed to the Korean War, called it a police action.
Yes.
And we were condemned to be thought of as a police action. So the Korean War did not get the recognition, and that had a deleterious effect on the veterans who came back from Korea. They wanted recognition, and they did not get it. And it had a psychological impact on them.
Yeah.
Second World War fellows came back, went back into their civilian employment. We had what we called post-war reconstruction in Australia, which was very important to get the economy going again. And Korean War had some impact on that. Of course, the first winter was such a desperately cold winter, there was a demand for wool. And there was the belief, because of some of General MacArthur's behaviour, that it would become the Third World War, and there was a demand for strategic materials. Australia had those strategic materials and there was demand. So Australia's economy picked up because of it was influenced by the Korean War, but we did not. The veterans didn't get the recognition. Right. The sailors and the people who were volunteers came back from Korea and went into civilian life. The sailors and the airmen were regulars. We had regular army, regular navy, and regular air force. Yeah. And they went on with their service career, getting themselves promoted. That was important. The army people went back to civilian life and found it hard to settle in. So it was the forgotten war.
That's an excellent point, sir.
So our experience was after Incheon, we were waiting to see whether we would go on to North Korea.
No. Let's talk about Incheon landing.
Yes.
So September 15th, 1950,
yes.
MacArthur landed in Incheon.
Yes.
I mean, UN forces landed in Incheon. Don't talk about MacArthur. What did you do? What did your ship do?
Our ship was, the British carrier was HMS Triumph, and we were escorting it. Triumph and the destroyers, the Canadian destroyers.
No, not the Triumph, but the other one.
Theseus?
Oh, no. British one is Triumph, and Australian one was
Sydney.
Sydney, yes.
Sydney hadn't come up by then.
Right.
So there were a number of aircraft carriers, American and British. They were flying sorties in support of the landing operations, but there was always a threat. We didn't know whether there were submarines in the area, and so we had to provide an escort. Also, the other threat, of course, was mines, because
were there many mines?
Yes.
Oh.
And we always had to be on the lookout for mines, because the North Koreans were releasing the mines into the rivers,
right,
or dropping them from sampans, against all the Geneva Conventions where a mine has to be tethered. So in some of the operations we'd see a mine and we'd have to sink it by rifle fire. So there was a threat, but for Incheon there was a possible air threat. So we had cruisers and destroyers. Two of the cruisers, same class as us, were actually in the landing bombardment force. We were not. We were standing by in case one of them got into trouble. But so we were escorting the carrier.
I see. So that was a very important mission.
It was.
Yep.
And then we were hovering, waiting for General MacArthur to decide whether he would go north or not. And we carried out an operation on the east coast up to a place called Chongjin,
Chongjin, yeah.
near the Russian border.
Yes.
We
Wow, you went up to Chongjin.
yeah.
Ah.
So we bombarded there, and the destroyers and the light cruisers were inshore, close in. The heavy cruisers and USS Missouri were further out and firing over the top of us. And this is where it was important for naval gunfire, naval maritime superiority. We were destroying the railway lines, and that was used for supporting the forces further south. So we were closing off tunnels, destroying chasing trains into tunnels.
Uh-huh. So you were still gunnery, anti-craft?
Yeah, I was. No, by then I'd moved to another gun on M3 pom-pom, which was.
So you actually fired the weapons?
No, I didn't.
No. Yeah, you are the
local gun direction officer.
right. And share that kind of experience with the young children that will listen to your interview. What was it like when you bombed this, or so many bombing for North Korean territory in Chongjin? What was it like to be inside of the ship?
Well, we were on the upper deck, but it was noisy. And sometimes when the gun, it was Whiteheart, when I was an M3 pom-pom, would fire on a forward bearing, and we'd be here, and we'd be looking down at the barrel of the gun. It was very noisy, and this is why I can't hear people these days. I have great problems. But then,
how long does the actual cannon reach? What is the range of the gunnery?
12 miles.
12 miles?
Yes.
So were you able to see North Korean soil from there? No.
Yeah, we could see, yes, we could.
You could?
Yes. But for some of our shoots, we had to have an aircraft spotter. And there was a distinction between the way we did it and the way the Americans did it.
Tell me the difference.
Well, the difference was that the Americans would fire for an area.
Yeah.
We would fire for a particular target.
Oh.
So I can remember one shoot we did. We were firing, and we were trying to destroy a bridge, and the American spotter said, "Wow, that's it, we've got it." And the captain said, "Is the bridge still there?" "Yes, sir, but we got the target."
Bridge is still there.
Yeah. So we were more precise in calling the fall of shot.
Wow, impressive.
Now,
and you were able to see when you were bombing them, right?
Well, we were a long way out to sea.
Right.
We could see the shore, but and the people in the director with their big binoculars. But our focus was on the possibility of an air attack.
Got it.
And so this continued, and then we got to close to the Yalu River, or the army did.
So you went back to the West Sea again?
No,
that's a Tuman River. It's a Tuman River.
Yeah.
Yalu River is in the west.
The west.
Okay.
But we came back to Sasebo in Japan.
Yes. To replenish, right?
To replenish. Mm-hmm. And the forces were approaching the Yalu River. They said the war is over. So the British fleet went back to Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. Our ship, you'll recall, had come from Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And that's where our families were.
Yeah.
So there was no point in our going back. And the Australian destroyers stayed up there. And we all went to Japan, through the inland sea of Japan, to Kure, which was the Australian base. It was interesting going through the Shimonoseki Strait, because there were high power lines going from Honshu to Kyushu.
Yeah.
And the captain said to the navigator, "How high?" those
The lines.
lines. How high is our mast? Are we going to fit underneath there? We didn't know. So we steered at them, and then we came to the turn. We put the helm over hard so that the ship would lean over and get
Lower.
And later on, one of the British carriers did carry away the power lines, and so the power lines in Shimonoseki Strait were quite a feature. Anyway, we went off to. The war was over. We went to Kure in Japan, did a refit, and while we were there, the captain was receiving reports from the battlefield, and they were identifying people in different uniforms amongst the enemy, the casualties. China had come into the war. And so, and people were being withdrawn on the east coast. They were withdrawing to Hungnam.
Yeah.
And on the east coast, on the west coast, they were withdrawing to Chinampo. Mm-hmm. So we were, our captain was encouraged by the American admiral to go to Chinampo with 2 Australian destroyers, 3 Canadian destroyers, and an American destroyer.
Jinnampo. Yeah.
Jinnampo.
Yeah.
To evacuate people from Jinnampo.
Mm.
And
when was it? That's kind of December 1950.
this is October.
October?
October
Oh.
1950.
Yeah.
And our captain was pretty gung-ho, and he wanted to go up the river. But by that time, one of the Canadian destroyers had gone aground, an Australian destroyer had gone aground. The charts were very imprecise, out of date, and our captain was prevailed upon not to go up, because if a light cruiser had gone up and got stuck on a mud bank, it would have been disastrous.
Yep.
So we stayed, and our captain was in charge of the operation, but he delegated control of the operation in Chinampo. We were at the mouth of the Taidong River. Mm. And then by then there were only 2 Canadian destroyers up there, 1 Australian, and the American destroyer. And they bombarded the port of Chinampo, and the refugees and evacuating forces came down. And by that time, the British had reassembled their force from Hong Kong, and they were coming up to regain the battlefield. We went from there to Incheon, and we'd been at sea a long time. And the Christmas was approaching, so we got we knew that the Chinese would not respect Christmas, and we thought there was a risk that they would attack on Christmas Day. So the American command, the United Nations command, said we must have a barrage of artillery right across the Korean Peninsula. And on the west coast, where there were islands, they put ships to plug the gap. So we had we were plugged into one of the gaps with the Australian destroyers. And our sailors went ashore on one of the islands to get some greenery, and they found an orphanage, a woman with about 20 Korean orphans in a terrible condition because winter had set in, and it was the coldest winter ever. So the orphanage was in a terrible state. They had no water, no food, no power. So our sailors went ashore, cut wood, mended their watering system, and we sent out an appeal. We gave them food, and the sailors surrendered presents they had for their families to give presents to the children. And I still tell the story of our contribution to Korean Christmas.
So that was in Incheon?
It was off Incheon. Chakto, I think.
Chakto?
Yes.
Chakto.
Yes.
So it was in the island, small island.
Yeah, small island, yes.
Wow. this is right time for you to show me. You said that you have a journal.
Yes, yes.
What is it? When did you write it, and what is about it?
We had to report the work we did.
So that was your part of duty to
Yes.
keep the documents,
Yes.
right? Journal.
So here we had the 7th of December 1950. Leaving the convoy, to know what, Ceylon patrolled off Chopeki Point to prevent landings from junks being made further down the coast. Theseus being made further. Theseus, when we met in the forenoon, reported that some of the junks are loaded with refugees. So that we just reported our experience in the war.
Did you write about the orphanage? Can you find that?
No.
No?
That was, well,
December 1950.
yes, it was. Christmas passed quietly. We closed up to our action stations as usual on Christmas Day. And as it was reported that a general attack was imminent, Ceylon moved up into an advanced bombardment berth beyond Walmido.
Any other major mission that you still remember that you did with the British ship, what is it, Ceylon? HMS Ceylon?
Yeah, then the communist attack went on, and Seoul was evacuated,
Yeah.
and Incheon was evacuated. And the Americans had lots of stores, and they were destroying their stores ashore, exploding ammunition, and they sent out landing craft full of food. So we had the British ships didn't feed as well as the Americans did, so we had great supplies of food coming from the American stores ashore in Incheon. And then as the front line moved south, we were behind the line firing at the advancing communists. And our ship was the last ship to leave Incheon as the front line moved south. But then we came back some weeks later with USS Missouri to retake Incheon. And so it was a very brief occupation that the communists had of Seoul and Incheon before we moved north again. In March, the ship left Korean waters. We went to Singapore.
When?
In March 1950.
51. Yeah.
And I left the ship in Singapore and went to a naval air station for experience there before getting a troop ship back to England to continue my training with the Royal Navy. And then for another year before going back to Australia. So that was...
When did you begin to write that journal?
Oh, we did it every
First
day.
day? No. First day that... What is the first day that in your journal that you began?
Oh. of May 1950.
12th
of May
May.
1950.
And when did you end it? 16th of April 1951. Ian, that's a very important record to share, okay? We all die, and sooner or later, nobody will know about this.
Well, I've extracted bits of this, and I have our ship's report of proceedings. And I wrote letters home to my family, and my mother kept all the letters. So
You still have the letters?
Yes.
Wow!
And I've extracted from there, from the captain's reports, from the official history, and my mother, the letter I wrote to my mother.
You still have their letters?
I still have those letters, and I have my family record, my personal record. Some of those I've expanded on.
Yeah, and I want to propose to scan all of it and share that with us.
Yeah.
We don't want to have those in physical format, but we want you to scan it.
Yep.
You know, digital scanning, right?
Yep.
So that we can publish it under your interview.
Right.
Unless you have something that you don't want to share, like
no, it used to be.
Secret,
Used to be.
but now not anymore.
No, but all cleared for.
Yeah. So, could you do that?
Yes, by all means.
You know, you can commission FedEx or any office to make a professional scanning without destroying your book,
Right.
somehow. And then, if you are willing to share your letters, also will be a very good material for children to. So I know some of the contents might not be proper.
Oh no, they're more as an 18-year-old midshipman. I was more interested in the cricket or the football that was being played.
It's another good story to tell.
Yes.
You know, war. Even during the war, the Canadians had an ice hockey game in Imjin River.
Did they?
Yeah, I can show you the picture. Actually, the Canadian curriculum book,
Yes.
the cover has that image.
Princess Patricia's Light Infantry.
Yeah, they did ice hockey in Imjin River.
Yeah.
And they still do it. They call Imjin Classic.
How?
So think about it, and if you are willing to share your letters, then we can scan it. You can scan it and give us the copy.
What is a better record?
Yeah.
I have extracted, and I have in a book, which I'm writing my family history, and I have extracted and consolidated. That is a better record.
Sure.
But it is not. It is not original text.
We love original text. So please introduce yourself. What is your name?
I'm Catherine Crawford, and I was born in Melbourne, and I have travelled quite a lot, including to Korea about 5 times.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
4 times? 5 times? Yes.
Tell me about it. When did you go first time to Korea?
We went just as the monument in Canberra was finished and had been dedicated. And
But remember, before that,
we went over before that.
yes, before we even started building. Remember, we stayed with
So you
the.
can cut all that part out, I hope.
We stayed with the Australian
That's
Army
right. We went over before it was finished.
to see what we were commemorating.
Yes, for me to understand and for Ian to see how Korea had developed. And we found it absolutely mind-boggling when we went down to it's changed its name now.
Busan.
Busan.
And we just couldn't believe that the country that had been at war, it didn't seem so long, much earlier.
When was first time that you were in Busan? 19?
About 1950. About 1980s, late 1980s.
1991.
We started off with 1991, but I thought we went later.
Later.
Yes.
Right. And when did you know your husband? When did you marry, actually?
We married in America, in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
In 1963. In fact, next month we will have our 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow. So you didn't know him when he was in Korea?
No. I was still at school.
Okay. And did you know anything about Korean War before you met your husband?
No, I didn't. And in fact, I took lots of phone calls during the building and prior to a few little ceremonies Ian had, such as laying a foundation stone, and it was because he knew a lot of the Koreans would have died before it was finished. So he wanted to give them an opportunity to come and see work in progress. And frequently I answered the phone I remember one woman in particular saying she'd lost her husband and also a brother in the Korean War. And she said, we had no idea where they were going, off to a country we'd never heard of. And she said, and we are so happy now we're going to have a focus for our grief.
That was
So-
very touching.
Tell me about your personal story. Your husband told me that you worked in education department in Canberra.
Yes.
Tell me, what did you do?
Lots of different things, all clerical things, but I think policy development was my latest job there. It was interesting, but it had its moments.
And what is your background to encourage to have a Korean War memorial in Canberra? What made you propose and encourage your husband to do those things?
Because I had seen the other monuments there, and I got tired of hearing the Koreans say, we are the forgotten war, and we don't have a memorial. I think that was it. And it really was, and I think to a certain extent it still is the forgotten war in Australia, certainly not in Korea. And what I've told you, I think what I'd like to tell you most of all is how great debt to the Korean government and the Korean people for the way they've looked after our veterans. That we never cease to be amazed at their generosity and their friendship. Even during the crisis with the pandemic, they sent masks to us.
Yep.
They kept us in masks for pretty well the 3 years. That was a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
That was done by Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs.
Yes.
Yes.
And the guy who think about that is my junior.
Oh,
I know him very well. I'm going to meet with him.
good.
I'm going to meet with the Vice Minister of MPVA and the guy that I just mentioned. He is now spokesperson for MPVA.
Well, please tell them how grateful we were and how useful they were to us.
We are always very humble the way the Korean people and the government have recognised Australia. And recognition is so important for people. It's important for morale during the war, and it's important for the peace of mind when they retired. And the revisit program, you've heard of that. That is so important.
So I'm going to recommend Ron, and who's that? I met him, Johnny Reinham. Johnny Reinham. He is one of the Korean War veterans. I just had an interview at my hotel, and I'm going to put their names, encourage the Consul General Lee to put their names in the list of revisit program.
Yeah, I'm glad about it, because I often fear that so many people are not aware of the revisit program, and I know that MPVA would want people to have the opportunity.
New people, those who never been to Korea after
Exactly.
they left, you know.
So important.
Yeah. But Catherine, I'm sorry, you were about to say something, right?
I was going to tell another instance where we were very humbled. Flying out of Korea on one of our visits, we were sitting next to a fellow, and he got talking to us, and when he knew Ian was a past veteran, or was a veteran, had been to Korea during the war, he must have been dealing with pens and pencils, but he immediately got out his pencils and bowed and gave us these lovely pencils to take with us. And it's just lovely acts of kindness like
The
that.
spontaneous.
Never forget.
You know why they are so thankful? Because they were extremely poor, completely devastated, destroyed, but now because 10th largest economy in the world.
Yes,
10th largest. It's much smaller than Australia. They don't have a drop of oil. They don't have natural resources, but now they are making vehicles, semiconductor computer chips, big ships, you know. That's why they are so thankful for the opportunity to rebuild their nation.
And they're an example of what we could get on and do better in this country.
But they're all very intelligent too. They come out here and they make sure their children go to the best schools that they can attend, and they work very hard. So I'm not surprised.
It's all about education in Korea. Education, education, and education. So that's exactly right. So, Catherine, please explain to young children in Australia and other countries that why we need to learn the history and the lessons of the Korean War.
Oh, I think it's important that we learn as much history from whatever country, but particularly the Korea and Australia, because so many of our men went over there and helped. And the Koreans have such an interesting culture, a difficult language, that they should learn as much as they could, and visit and study the geography, the history, and the other social effects.
And that's why we are making it, and so that some of the students will listen to you. Listen. And I briefly explain about the Simpson Prize. The Simpson was the World War I hero of Australia, and national government and the History Association, Teachers Association has run this program called the Simpson Prize. They choose 16 students from all different provinces, and then they bring them to Canberra and then have a final contest about the World War I, and they write an essay and so on, and then they finally choose 8 students, and they give these 8 students to experience other country. And when I was in Canberra for Australia's History Teachers Association annual meeting, one of those people who running that program came to me and say, why don't we run Korea Prize? So we are going to do it, and I proposed that, why don't we do it with the New Zealand, Canada, and Great Britain, and the United States. So it's going to be Commonwealth and US program for Korean Prize.
Well, I'd say to all those children, work hard, study hard, and travel, because you only know a country if you go to it. And it's good when you go that you do know its history, you know its customs, so work hard.
Very good point. They need to go see other country, and that's why this program, Korea Prize, will offer that opportunity.
And those countries that you mentioned share a revisit to Korea.
Absolutely.
At the same time of the year, in April each year.
Did Ian tell you that one of our grandsons went to Korea?
No.
He went on the program for the grandchildren
Yep.
of veterans.
I know the program.
You started it?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I didn't start it, but I know the program.
You know, yes. Well, he came back just so full of everything he had learned about the Koreans, and it was such a surprise for him.
Did he like it?
Oh, he loved it.
He saw things in the Korean War Memorial that we couldn't find.
The most exciting thing was he found a video of his grandfather. So, no, but it was such an eye-opener for him to be at an Asian country and meeting different people and eating different food and learning so much about the things around him.
Excellent. That's why it is very important.
Oh, absolutely.
To educate the history.
So I congratulate you and encourage you to keep on visiting the different countries.
Thank you, thank you.
We all learn.
Yeah. Catherine, this house is beautiful, surrounded with the arts, and I can tell that everything is being cared by you. What is the Korean War legacy to you? Personally.
Personally, because we were brought up in a tradition in Australia of fathers, uncles, in some families, elder brothers, having been to the First World War and the Second World War,
Yep.
there's a tradition of military services in support of our country's well-being. And I am very proud that I can share that participation. I feel it's part of being an Australian.
Korean War legacy.
Yes.
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 What is personally Korea to you now? You didn't know anything about Korea. Now, what is Korea to you personally?
For me, it's an entree to East Asia, to understanding the East Asian people. And I say, people say we're British, we look to America, we should forget all those and we just look at Asia. For me, we have to be capable of all those things. We have to be capable of looking to Europe for certain traditions. We look to Asia because they're so close and so important to our understanding them and they're understanding us, and looking to America for its power. But we also have to realize that people in the South Pacific, the islands, look to us. So it is Korea links important to how we have to be capable of looking everywhere for the well-being of our country, of our national strategy.
Mm. Any other episode or anything that you wanted to share with this interview? I think you have a lot of stories to tell me, and please think about it. What is it?
The one thing that we were capable of doing, we were very remote at times. We were very threatened when China came into the war, and we felt very lonely. We felt threatened by that malevolent colossus of China. So we had to make our own fun, our own interests. So we used to depend on our people reading stories to the sailors. We used to listen to Radio Australia, and they used to give us news reports. So keeping people informed, keeping people in touch is so important. And it's important for morale that we don't feel neglected or forgotten. And there was always that threat. So it's being recognized. And when we were going through this loneliness period, when the China came into the war, our forces had been withdrawn, there was a great threat. Winter was setting in. Morale was absolutely rock bottom. The story came through that we'd been seen on television and we were going to get a medal. We'd been recognized. So the story that has always stuck with me, even from the age of being a 19-year-old midshipman, and it's stuck with me ever since, the importance of recognition for morale during the war and for the peace of mind in our old age. And that's the one that I keep on telling people, recognize people.
Got it. Is there any message to the Korean people? Talking to the camera lens and talking to them.
Well, talking to the Korean people, we enjoy your company. We enjoy your gratitude. Not everybody thanks the veterans to the extent that the Korean people do. It is not just the Ministry of Patriotism, Veterans Affairs and the Korean government, it's the Korean people. When we say to people, I was in the Korean War, the immediate thing is thank you for what you did. And the French are like that from the First World War, but the Koreans give a great effect to it, to us in the Korean War. And we enjoyed that recognition.
It has to be reciprocal. You fought for them. Now it's for them to thank you, right?
Yeah, and it is for us in Australia to understand what happened in 1950 to 53.
Yes.
And the impact it had had on the Korean people. And I encourage greater understanding between the two countries, which can be achieved in our national. We achieve it in the Australian War Memorial, but that is just the war experience. We have to understand your culture. We can do more there. Both countries can do more.
I will sign the MOU with the President of Australia's History Teachers Association, Catherine Baron, B-A-R-O-N, on production of Australian curriculum book about the Korean War. It's Australia's participation in the Korean War and its legacy. And when I do that, I will share that MOU with you. And
Thank you.
I do Korean Prize program for Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Great Britain, and the United States, I will share that with you too.
Those countries worked together. And we commemorate together.
Yep. So it is my great honor and pleasure to meet you and to know of your whole service, and especially the journal that you kept.
Oh, the Midshipman's Journal, yes.
Precious. So
Yes.
you have to share that with us, okay?
Yes.
So please do that, and then I will follow up with you about the many different things that we're going to do together.
And you should have a copy of this, the Korean, the Consul General and the Anzac Memorial of Sydney, of Hyde Park. Have you been there?
Yeah,
They produced this.
I see it.
Have you seen this?
No,
That's for you.
thank you.
All
right, so I know you have so much more to tell me and us about your service, but always interview has to end, and this is the time. Again, thank you for your fight for the Korean people, and still you're working for the legacy, which include the Korean War Memorial, the beautiful one that I actually was very impressed in the NJAC Parade Street there, in the War Memorial.
And let me say this, there is still work to be done. We want to include in that memorial some of the horticulture that one sees in Busan at the United Nations Memorial Cemetery.
Yes.
So that families who may not ever get to Korea will have an opportunity to see the beauty and the generosity of the Korean people in maintaining.
So what do you need? You need flour and...
We need to get the trees to act as bookends to the memorial, but as you do in Busan, by each grave there is a rose bush and a Boxus Koreana.
Absolutely.
And so we want to inject the horticulture of Busan.
But you have to clarify with your own government because they are very strict about the foreign, plants and
Yes,
so on.
they are.
Yeah.
They resisted it for a long time, but they've now accepted it. And
they accepted it?
Oh, they accepted it.
Okay, then send me an email about it, and then I'll forward it to the MPVA, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. And thank you, Catherine.
There's a